This is the Chi Codes Podcast with your host, Thomas Dockstader.
John, glad to have you on, my friend. An old friend of mine. You were my first boss when I was 14 years old. I joined the construction ranks in the FLDS, and you were my boss, and we worked together for a couple of years.
That was a lot of fun.
It was a lot of fun.
We actually had a lot of fun, didn't we?
Yeah, I had a great time. Yeah, it was an awesome learning experience for me because it was kind of the first time that I had separated from my dad and was kind of in an environment where I was being told what to do and it wasn't a family member, right?
Gotcha.
And so I remember distinctly it was very, it was a moment where I kind of learned to stop being a boy. And it was like, oh, okay, I have to like perform, right? And I have to like put forth effort. And it was a good experience.
And I had kind of the expectation of you of not being a boy, but being a man and performing the work. And that's kind of the way I looked at you.
Yeah.
And you fulfilled it.
Yeah. Well, and that was a big part of it too, is I wanted that accolade, right? Like I wanted you to say, hey, you're doing a good job, right? Exactly. I didn't want to be seen as kind of the slacker, not putting forth the effort. So that was a great experience for me. But anyway, so having you on, you got an incredible story. And kind of the purpose of my podcast is to have people share their stories. And I think your story of survival and resilience and just really like getting through a lot of really hard stuff. So I'm excited to talk about that today. And where I'd kind of like to start off is just walk me through like a basic understanding of, hey, where'd you grow up and, what kind of things went on, and let's kind of get into the meat of things.
Gotcha. Well, I grew up in Harriman, and which is in Salt Lake. Mm-hmm. It's kind of out on the west side. Back then, Harriman was very primitive. Mm-hmm. Compared to what we know today. But I grew up there and went to school at Alta Academy.
Which was the FLDS school.
Exactly.
Right?
That was put together by Rulon Jeffs and Warren Jeffs was the principal. Mm-hmm. Went there, graduated there, and kind of began kind of the journey of life there. Mm-hmm. I was called on a mission by Rulon Jeffs at the tender age of 17 and a half to build his house, which I did, and it caused a lot of conflict between his sons and
really,
my dad.
I did not know that.
And back then I didn't know that.
Okay.
I was literally called on a mission at the age of 17 to supposedly by God, and built his house, and you're aware of it.
Sure.
It was the house just east of the Alta Academy School,
yep.
which was the meeting house. Mm-hmm. And then we put the addition on the meeting house. I don't know if you remember all that. It was kind of a crazy time.
I was probably a little young.
But that was my first direct association with the hierarchy of the priesthood. Mm-hmm. And I fulfilled that mission for Rulon Jeffs, and it caused indifference between Warren and I, mm-hmm. because Rulon and I developed a friendship. Mm. Rulon would actually call me and say, "You want to take me to lunch?"
Oh, wow.
And I would go to lunch with him, and right in the middle of lunch, Warren would call and say, "Father, where are you?" And I'm with John Rohbock having lunch, and that was the beginning of you know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So
interesting.
I did that mission. I built this house, and then I was actually called on several other missions. The addition to the meeting house, where we added a bunch of square footage to the original White House. Mm-hmm. And then obviously I fulfilled a mission when everybody was called to leave the Salt Lake area and move to Colorado City. I served a 2.5-year mission there.
Mm-hmm.
So the priesthood used me a lot.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of my funds from the company, back then it was Precision Construction, went to the priesthood.
Mm-hmm.
So, quick recap.
Okay. And then, so, and when I was working for you, you got married.
Mm-hmm.
And in that religion, it's not a, you go and choose, you court your wife and then you choose that person. It's literally, you get a phone call. They're like, we have a wife for you. You go and you get married. And in some cases, maybe you know the person, maybe you don't. And then that's it. You're married.
Yeah. I got a phone call September 2nd, 1995, and was told to go see Rulon Jeffs. And Warren was there, and Leroy Jeffs and my father. And I was told that I was going to marry Lenora Bauer. Had no clue.
Didn't know who she was.
Had no I didn't even know who she was.
Mm-hmm.
Ended up marrying her that evening. So scared of each other that, I took
How
her.
old were you?
I was 23.
23. Okay.
She was 23 as well.
Okay.
And by the way, that was pretty old.
Oh, super. Yeah.
Back then. She was, she hadn't even turned herself in.
Wow.
Took her to my apartment that I'd built in my father's house. I had an apartment that I had built, and we were so scared of each other that, I said, look, I'm going to take the couch.
Oh,
you take the bedroom because, it was,
sure.
It was just,
you just too short.
You just didn't even know anything about it. And it was a beautiful experience. But it took us a long time to learn who each other was. And I had no idea of her needs and her expectations. And I don't think she did of mine either. So it was an experience.
Yeah, I would say so. I think, that's a great point. Like in the religion, you're so alienated from any type of dating or courting or anything. The women you talk to is your mom and your sisters, basically. That's the extent of it.
Exactly.
So then you're just like kind of forced into this situation where all of a sudden you're not supposed to suppress your feelings or whatever, but it's such a foreign like feeling. And she has also been taught the same thing.
Exactly. And it's interesting because it took us 3 or 4 months to date each other before we even understood each other.
Yeah.
Some of the letters that I received from her years later was based on, just understanding who I was. It wasn't a dating process. It was basically you were put into it. And by the way, she was a fantastic woman, very devoted, very kind, and couldn't ask for a better lady. However, it was stressful for both of us because we just the element of surprise and two characters that just didn't even know each other.
Yeah. Super, very odd, right? Like for any situation to just be put into that and then try to make it work. But I know you guys had a great relationship, and I saw that kind of blossoming, and I was around when you guys had your first child, and things like that.
I actually remember you holding my first son and playing with him, and I just remember some of the experiences there. It was interesting.
Yeah.
It was fun.
It was a good time, dude.
Yeah. And if you don't know any different, those were the good days.
Exactly. You know only what you know.
Exactly.
Right. Like we were very unaware of what was going on. But okay, so then things kind of progress, right? And when Rulon kind of got sick, and he had a stroke, I believe, and he wasn't really running the church very much. It was ultimately Warren had kind of stepped in and was in his father's stead and kind of running things, and things started to ramp up quite a bit, right? Like we had to, Saturday work project where you had to go and report. All the men of the community had to go and report and do work. But beyond that was kind of happening more on like a grand scale. And when the Olympics were coming to Salt Lake City, the church basically came out and said, everybody that's living in Salt Lake needs to all move to Colorado City, because there was a faction in Colorado City, faction in Salt Lake City, and then a faction in Canada. And basically the people in Salt Lake were to basically get to Colorado City.
Yeah, we were told, I don't know if you were still around, but we were told that Salt Lake was going to be destroyed.
Yeah. So listen to this. This is great. So we're told this whole time that we're growing up that these judgment days are coming, the apocalypse, the destructions, they're coming around the year 2000. Well, I get this bright idea that I'm going to leave the church July of 2001. July of 2001. Then they come out and say, oh, everyone has to move to Colorado City. Then 9/11 happens. And I'm thinking, son of a bitch, I missed it. I left right before all this stuff was going to go down. Like it was like a panic, right? Because I was like, oh my gosh. And then my family and everybody moved down and I stayed in Salt Lake City. But for you
probably thought you were doomed.
Yeah, big time. So I headed into the alcohol and drugs and all that stuff, like pretty heavy at that point. But for you, you know, it was a big community effort to move all those people.
Oh my gosh. It was so stressful. I was called on another mission at that time to move the people down. There were individuals, Lewis Nilsson, myself, and others that were called to prepare for the Exodus. Mm-hmm. I remember working 78 to 90 hours solid, preparing homes for people to live in. The exhaustion, you can't even imagine. The stress. My family was moved into the back of a cabinet shop that wasn't even acceptable for people to live in. It was all I could do to put it together and make it so that my kids and I could actually live there.
Oh my gosh.
We worked to the point that we would fall on the outside of the doors of our truck, exhausted, and wake up the next morning.
Oh my gosh.
And it was expected. But being devoted and believing that this was a requirement to be accepted,
yep.
you did what you had to do.
Right.
And there's many of us that worked ourselves nearly to death on these projects. And I fulfilled that mission for 2 years.
Just moving people.
Absolutely.
Getting them settled.
To give you an idea, my blue truck, I had a Ford pickup that I bought that had 30,000 miles on it. Within 1 year, I had 230,000 miles.
Oh my gosh.
Moving people back and forth from Salt Lake. It's hard to describe the effort that went into that. Never received a payment from the priesthood. Went so broke that we were putting milk on a Chevron card to survive.
Wow.
It was one of the most stressful times of my life that is hard to describe, because we worked so hard. We worked late in the evenings. We worked weekends. Then you went to church and kind of got the drill
Yep.
of where things were and where you need to be. And basically from 2000 to 2002 was tough.
Mm-hmm. And the rhetoric was really ramping, right? Like,
well, that's when Rulin was kind of taking a back seat, and Warren was basically dictating. To give you an idea, I was in Rulin, Jeff's house, talking with my sisters in his kitchen with Rulin, and he was expressing his gratitude for all the things that we'd done, and Warren walked in. And if the cold look of hell could be described, he looked at me like, what in the heck are you doing in Rulin's house? Mm-hmm. Literally the next priesthood meeting, I'm not kidding, Thomas, the next priesthood meeting was, you brothers who are married to, or who your sisters are married to the prophet of the Lord, do not come to Rulin's house.
Because you had 2 of your sisters were married to Rulon, right?
I had 2 of my sisters that were married to Rulon. They invited me.
Right.
And they saw the poverty and the struggles that my family, if it weren't for them, I don't know where we would be, because they were providing us blankets, everything, because that's how desolate we were.
And so Rulon had, what?
And Rulon cared.
Yeah.
And I was talking to him when Warren walked in. The next priesthood meeting was, do you brothers who are associated with women that have married Rulon Jeffs, do not come to the house without an appointment through proper priesthood order.
Oh my gosh. That's so wild.
Isn't that crazy?
Wow. He's so worried, right? I mean, that just begs to tell you that he's just like, he's doing something wrong, and he is just taking advantage, and he doesn't want any single possibility of his deviation of his plan, right?
Well, he was just, if you look back on it like I have, and you were as close as I was, because I was a personal bodyguard to Rulon Jeffs in Salt Lake, and I was a personal bodyguard and concierge to Warren in Colorado City. If you stand back and look at it, and look at the I don't know how you say it, the decline.
Yep.
This usurping of authority, power, whatever you want to call it. It's staggering. Rulon had his first stroke in 1996, just months after I was married, after he'd married me to Lenora Bauer. That was the beginning of the alteration of an administration by Rulon Jeffs to Warren Jeffs. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Right when that happened, he started slowly working his way in and giving orders and running the meetings. And
I never subscribed. I was loyal to Rulon.
Well, he probably felt that.
Because Rulon loved me.
Yeah.
And he pulled me very close.
Yeah.
I could go in for hours and tell you stuff, but we don't have time for it today.
Yeah.
But that was a threat and a problem to Warren.
Yeah. And he could feel it, right?
Yeah.
So you're all in Colorado City, you're all, working along and doing your thing. And, the news, me being on the outside and kind of watching it from the outside, the media started to ramp up with the whole Texas, when they moved and started building that temple in Texas, there was daily news reports. What are they doing? What's going on? What's happening? Right. I'm curious, what was happening on the inside? When all that was happening, because I've seen, interviews from your sister, Alicia, where she talks about, her children being taken down there, but she couldn't go. Right. And it's just this weird, talk to me about that.
Well, the families were all torn apart. There was people that qualified for the high order. There was people that didn't qualify. There was men who were sent away. There were women who were put in position to qualify in houses of repentance.
So qualify, you mean, okay. So for those listening, it's not a process that they understand the rules to the game, right? Qualify means Warren says so.
That's right.
There is no
that's right.
rule. And then when you say sent away, literally they lose their family and children. They have to leave the community, and their children and wives are reassigned to other men. Correct?
Exactly. Well, in 2003, in November of 2003, I'm out working on a job. And just so you and your listeners understand, my father and I were the first 2 men excommunicated and sent away from the church.
I didn't know that.
We were the first 2 men. There wasn't any men before. There was many men after.
Right.
I got a call from Wendell Nilsson,
which was one of the leaders of the church.
And he says, you and your father need to come see me immediately. I'm in Cedar City working, and I'm I'm working, and I'm not kidding, Tom. I felt the cold chill of hell.
That was your intuition telling you.
In that phone call.
Something was wrong.
I'm not kidding you.
Yeah.
And I'm like, so I called my father, and he says, did Wendell call you? And he goes, yeah. Now, remember, my father was corrected, not excommunicated, but corrected 2 months earlier in September.
Explain it.
He received a revelation from Warren Jeffs that he was aspiring and was not fulfilling the desire of the Lord. So there was a revelation, and his family was taken from him, and he was living in an apartment that he'd built in his shop. And being the son that I was, I saw to him. I fed him, took him to work, made sure he was okay. And I really believe that that's one of the things that got me in trouble. Leroy Jeffs, Warren's older brother, called me and says, I need to talk to you. I went in and talked to him. And this is a week before I was excommunicated and told to leave the community with my father.
Okay.
And he said to me, he says, how do you feel? And obviously he was
fishing,
screening me to report back to Warren. Because he called me and said, I need to have a talk with you. And I went to him, and in his office, he said to me, he says, how do you feel? He asked me, how do you feel about the revelation given to your father for the correction? And I said to him, I says, well, if my father's guilty of those things that was given in the revelation, all of us are, including you.
Uh-oh.
I says, because we're all aspiring to be like God or whatever.
Yeah.
And Leroy actually turned his chair around and wouldn't even look at me.
Are you kidding me?
I am not kidding.
He just turned around.
He turned his chair around and wouldn't face me.
And then said what?
Then he turned around after a couple minutes, and he was just weeping, and he says, you're right. And that was pretty much the end of the conversation.
So weird.
1 week later, Wendell Nilsson calls to see my father and I. And we sit in his office at Western Precision, right there in Colorado City.
Yep.
By the way, the building that I had worked my ever-living
that you basically built
out to put together for him. That's a whole nother story of all the things that we were doing to try to, I mean, gosh, Tom, you know, we could go on for days. But anyway, we're gonna kind of simplify this. But Wendell calls me, and my father and I sit down, and he goes, I have been given direction by Warren S. Jeffs, the holy prophet of God, to excommunicate you and your father and tell you to leave this society and go make your repentance elsewhere. Now, mind you, I hadn't even talked to Lenora or my family about any of this because I just heard of it, that I needed to come to see Wendell Nilsson.
Yeah, right.
Leroy Jeffs was in the office, and he wouldn't even look at us. His arms were folded. He was on the side of the desk while Wendell was talking. Wendell was so pale that he couldn't hardly even talk. Leroy never made eye contact with me or my father. And again, I want to reemphasize, my father and I were the first two of the beginning of this whole crusade.
Right.
Believing, as I was, I said to Wendell, I says, I'll go and repent and do what you've asked. I didn't understand the ramifications of this whole deal.
Yeah.
I went to my house, and they had already taken all four of my children. Nora, my youngest, wasn't even born yet. My wife actually looked at me and said, did you commit adultery?
That was, okay.
Because that was
what else could it be, right?
That was usually the premises of losing priesthood and being excommunicated.
Exactly. And that to up to that point, most men that had kind of been excommunicated, it was typically
because of something,
adultery or like something in that realm, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
It was pretty relevant.
Yeah.
Or abusive, or drunkenness or something. Right. But I looked at Lenore and I says, "Really? Do you really think I committed adultery?" And she goes, "I know you." I says, "Well, I know you too." And I says, this is where my naiveness was very present. Mm-hmm. I said to her, "This is just a test. It's a priesthood test. We can get through this." And she actually fell to the ground and says, "I'm not doing this." She actually was smarter than I was. I didn't even get to say goodbye to my children. They were already gone.
Of course. They
have
it all planned out.
They'd already taken them.
Yep.
And I gathered a couple bags of things and I left the community. We lived in a Motel 6 for about 3-4 weeks.
Were you thinking let's say at that 3-4 weeks, were you thinking like, I'm going to get a phone call?
Exactly. And I thought to myself, what in the hell had I done? Because I think you saw it. I think many of the people saw it, that the Rohbocks were extremely devoted allies to the priesthood.
Yeah, they were always in the mix.
We were always the front guys to projects. We were, I mean, we just, and we didn't do it because we were spotlight feeders. We did it because we believed that's what was called.
Yeah.
But, 3 weeks into this thing, Warren calls me and says, "Your father has partaken of the spirit of perdition. And unless you confess the sins of your father and you, the Lord has no use for you." Click, hang up, nothing more.
He hung up.
Yeah.
So he's fishing, basically.
And I'm sitting here going, I finally went to my dad and I says, "What did you do?"
Yeah.
And he goes, "I don't know what I did." And we're sitting here, and he told me at that time, he said, "Leave your father." And it's interesting because Wendell Nilsson, when we were excommunicated, said, "Stay close to your father to pass this test and help him through it." The next thing I know, in 3 weeks, Warren calls me and says, "Leave your father because he's partaken of the spirit of perdition."
Whatever that means.
This is in Hurricane, Utah.
Yep.
So I went to Cedar City, and I actually lived in a guy's garage for over 6 months.
Was it for rent?
No, it was a guy I knew, and I won't say his name.
All right, fine.
But he was so scared because he knew, we'd done a lot of business together, but he's like, "Take my garage. I'll bring a recliner out and you can sleep in there." I was going down to the Flying J and taking showers and
oh my gosh,
trying to survive, because the whole thing in my mind was, this is temporary.
Right. You didn't want to go and establish.
Exactly. We got to figure this out. I got to figure out where the hell I crossed the line. Mm-hmm. Who did I offend? What did I do? And not to get graphic or anything, but I was confessing things even like...
Yeah, I get it. Just
things
basic,
that are so irrelevant.
Just basic stuff.
You know what
just
I mean? Because I just didn't even know what I'd done.
Yeah. And this, one thing I want to point out, this is the level of brainwashing and control this leadership group of the FLDS had over its people. Mm-hmm. To where you up and left your wife and your kids, and the whole time you're not fighting. You're thinking, okay, what have I done wrong? Like and like to your point, you explained how you were working 75 hours in a row and like this, just killing yourself. You had no money. And yet when they told you to go away, you weren't like, "Oh, thank goodness, I'm done with that place." You were like, "How do I get back? What's wrong? What have I done?" That is the amount of control they had over you.
Well, and going back to some of the conversations you and I have had in the past, When you mix God and religion and salvation on principle belief and you manipulate it, that is a hard thing to read. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
Sure.
And so you're sitting here going, oh man, I must have crossed the line, and I don't even know how I crossed the line. Mm-hmm. But I was writing 4 or 5, Warren said, write letters of confession. And I was writing 4 or 5 letters of even a can of soup that I'd stole when I was 10 years old because I was hungry.
Man, I can't imagine him reading those.
And
you know
what I mean?
Yeah.
Because those are the kind of things that I thought that I was disqualified
Makes
for.
Makes
sense. But anyway, this went on and on and on and on and on. And I would say about 8 months went by, and I had left my father, and I was just, to give you an idea of what this does physically to a man, I was about 213 pounds. And when Warren called me 8 to 9 months later, I was 140 pounds. The mental anguish was something like being in Guantanamo Bay. Mm. You're racking your brain, not only on a personal level, but a religious level. Mm-hmm. Where and how did I cross the line?
Yep. So
Warren calls me about 8 months later, and I hear Nephi Jeffs.
His brother.
Exactly. And he says, Warren, the holy prophet, would like to talk to you. I'm like, okay, wow. I've sent hundreds, maybe even 1,000 letters in by now. Mm-hmm. Just so heartbroken and so devastated that you can't describe this. Mm-hmm. And click, click, click. Another man answers the phone and says, the Holy Prophet Warren would like to talk to you. Click, 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 click. They were hiding the cell phones.
Because Warren was on the run at this point.
Yeah,
he was on the FBI's most wanted list at this point.
Not quite yet.
Oh, he wasn't on the
Not quite yet.
But he was on the run.
Because I was excommunicated in 2003. He was on the FBI's most listed 2005, 2006.
Okay.
And so this was the incipient stage of Texas, Colorado, North Dakota, all these secret societies or neighborhoods or whatever.
So they were developing these little enclaves, basically. And the most famous one was the one in Texas where they put up this huge temple just out in the middle of the barren Texas desert.
Right.
And that got a lot of attention.
Right. And that's a whole nother story.
Yep.
But anyway, after 3 or 4 clicks and 3 or 4 different people, Warren finally comes to the phone. And he says, John, how are you? And being transparent as I always have been, I says, I'm not doing real well. Because I actually had been to a doctor a couple of weeks before, and he says, I don't know what the hell is going on in your life, but you are being eaten alive. You better get this figured out or you're not going to make it. And I said to Warren, I'm not doing too well. And he says to me his exact words, and he shouted it over the phone. Did you write the letters to kill me and my family? I was so shocked and didn't really know how to answer because I was offended. Because, Tom, I knew nothing of this. I had no idea that even such a thing existed. And he yelled it again. Did you write those letters to me and my family? And my exact words to him is, because now I'm mad. And I said, Warren, I don't know what the hell you're talking about. Because I didn't. And he calmly replied, there are traitors among us. endure this for a little longer. Now, remember, this is in 2003. I'd been excommunicated for 8 months. Now, when he said that, in my mind, I'm like, what the hell is going on?
Mm-hmm.
You realize he just hung up after that? No more conversation. Just hang up. I left my job in Cedar City and drove to Hurricane where my father was staying. I walked right into his house. I didn't even knock. And I said, Warren just called me. And he asked me if I'd written those letters to kill him and his family. Father, what is going on? And my father looked at me and says, I know as much as you do.
Did you ever find out what the letter, like what he was referring to? Never.
No,
Never.
Jeez. But from that time on, I now remember, so let's go back just a minute. Even though he'd made that phone call, it was irrelevant because my family, 5 weeks after I was excommunicated, my youngest daughter was born 2.5 weeks after I was excommunicated. Mm-hmm. Never saw her till she was 10. But my family was remarried for time and all eternity to Lyle Jeffs, his brother, 5 weeks after I was excommunicated. So the games were still there.
Right.
Do you see what I'm saying?
He wasn't going to bring you back in. That was done.
But so Tom, I didn't know this.
Right.
I didn't know that she
So when did you find out? So from the time that he called you then, when did you find out that she was remarried?
Almost 2 years later.
2 years. Okay. So what did you do from when he called that day for the next 2 years? Did you just stay and waiting?
So in my mind, I'm thinking, oh, there's a conspiracy. Warren is the holy prophet and people are seeking to kill him. And I'm in the middle of this somehow. But I didn't know that my family was reassigned. So a friend of mine got excommunicated, and we are at Applebee's and talking, and he goes, it's just a tragedy that she married such a dirtbag. And I'm like, I'm shocked. I'm like, what do you mean a dirtbag?
You just got a kick in the gut.
And he goes, yeah, she married Lyle Jeffs, Warren's little brother, from the same mother as Warren, Marilyn.
Yep.
I almost threw up because even after that much time, I was thinking Warren is hiding because there's a conspiracy. And that's where I had to reinvent myself. I actually struggled with that. I actually puked. Went out to the side of my truck, and my friend was trying to help me up. And he goes, dude, I didn't know you didn't know. And I was out on the side of the truck.
That would be devastating.
Puking on the ground. And he goes, dude, I thought you knew. I didn't know. Because this whole time I was working for the privilege of receiving my family back.
Right. Exactly. Yep.
I didn't know that it was already a done deal.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
I actually drove to Flagstaff, Arizona, and checked into the Little America Hotel. The agony of mind, if I were to describe it, was so intense that you would look up in the sky and you didn't know how the earth could keep rotating.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't know how people could go in and out of stores. You didn't know how people could enjoy a dinner or sit and watch the TV. I was in such agony of mind and heart that even my body was rejecting food.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I don't know if that can be understood.
100%.
Unless you've been through it.
That mind-body connection, dude. You were just...
I went and checked into a hotel, and I took 16 Ambien. because I don't know that it was to eliminate myself. I don't know that it was to, I don't know what it was. I just know that it was, I couldn't deal with this kind of pain any longer.
Yeah.
It's worse pain than having a severed finger or anything.
Sure.
It's something that cannot be described. And I woke up a couple days later. I rented the room for 3 days. And I woke up a couple days later and I got out of that bed and crawled over to the mirror and looked in the mirror. You could literally see the veins in my neck down into my chest. They were pulsating. You could see the blue in my face. This is tough.
Yeah.
You could, I was done. I was so emotionally spent, being rejected. And I know it's one of the hardest things to describe because you gave your life for something and to find out that it's just not real.
Right.
I looked myself in the mirror and the thought came to my mind, you have to let all this go or you're not going to make it. You have to believe. Now, remember that Warren had made the priesthood council raise their right hand and dedicate my father and I. I found out about this later from several individuals that were in Texas to the priesthood circles. These men were later excommunicated and told me that Warren had actually made them raise their hand to the square of the priesthood and dedicate my father and I to the devil because we were sons of perdition.
Oh my gosh.
Now, taking that and taking the experience that you went through and separating yourself between religion, family, associations, and rebuilding yourself on the principle of this just isn't true.
You're so right. Like I try to explain this to people, even just for me leaving by choice. Okay. I left everything, your friends, your family, like everybody you grew up with, your belief system, like all these things. But in your case, it was literally ripped out of you, like you were ripped apart from it. And it was your entire belief system, everything you were raised on, the reason you were working the 70-hour days, the reason that you were, that you were putting all this effort into, you were raising your children to live this, you were working with your wife, your family was in it, your friends were in it, everybody was there. And then all of a sudden in one moment, it was all gone.
It's all gone.
All gone.
And you are literally living alone. I could not find a friend. And remember, my father, I was living under the auspices of what Warren had said. My father had partaken of the spirit of perdition. I was all alone. I actually ran into one of my brothers, in a gas station several months after this. And he walked right up to me and said, the whole entire people know what you and Dad did, but you don't. And until you confess and repent, you're never going to be back. And walked off. I'm sitting here holding my big gold cup and I'm going, I've missed the memo somewhere because I just don't understand this.
So was what you had done was they conspired to murder him? Was that the charge? Or
now that I've been out, you got to understand this is almost 23 years later.
Right.
I've heard so many things from so many people. I my kids told me that Lyle had told them and my wife that I'd committed adultery. Other members that have come out, and I won't mention names, but they said that Warren had actually told them that my father and I were having meetings to conspire to kill the prophet. None of this ever happened. None of this was ever true. So, like I said, the rebuilding of my faith and the rebuilding of myself wasn't an overnight thing. And, 23 years later, I'm still reinventing myself.
Sure.
But what I've concluded, what I'm learning, is that you can't base your belief, you can't base your trust, you can't base even your feelings or your emotions on things or principles.
Mm-hmm.
You have to have something deeper than that.
Mm-hmm.
And when I looked in that mirror and saw the person that I saw and hardly even recognized him, and that's when I realized that you have got to learn to be true to yourself, because if you live by what men say and what they have said about you, you're about as miserable as they can get.
Well, yeah. And I mean, to that point, you did base your validation and your value off of what the church said and thought about you.
Well, that's the principle of the whole thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, and we were taught that God and the prophet only do right, and it's only through the prophet that you're going to ever amount to anything.
Right. So when that was gone, there went all your value. Yeah. And you didn't know how to go find yourself.
No.
I mean, so that's actually one of the reasons that we kind of talked about having you come on, because, there is just such an influx of suicide in this community of people that have left the community, excommunicated, whatever it is. Like, we're hearing about it constantly, all the time, just like one after the other, right? People just really getting to the point, similar to what you're explaining, where once it's gone, they just don't know how to find a base. And we quickly go into numbing ourselves with alcohol and drugs and things like that. But then that at some point stops working and it starts hurting you really, really badly. And a lot of people feel that their only way to escape is to end their own lives.
Which is unfortunate.
Sure.
And I tell my kids and I tell friends that I know real well, I've been to places that I can never go again because I have knowledge of it. And my heart breaks for people that actually take their own lives. Mm-hmm. And I used to have quite a bit of judgment over that. I don't anymore.
Mm-hmm.
The agony of mind can be more sophisticated and painful than any injury physically.
Yeah.
And it is a tough thing to reinvent yourself and stop subscribing to outward noises and reach deep within yourself. Validate yourself, because you are something that matters.
Mm-hmm.
You are you're as important as a creature as ever there was.
Yep.
And when you come from a society or a religion that tells you that there's no way that you can be of something of any importance without certain curriculum, that's false. It has taken me years, Tom, to put aside that thinking and put on a different thinking of, and I'm not talking about conceit. I'm not talking about self-aggrandizement. I'm talking about something that is way deeper than that, which is why I love your book. And I'm just going to tell you, thank you for your book.
Awesome. Thank you.
Because it is great insight. But beyond what we understand, individuals have got to reach beyond alcohol, drugs, relationships, religion. And you've got to reach deeper because there's something deeper than that.
Yep.
You know what I'm talking about?
I sure do. Anything outside of you it's a dead end, ultimately.
And that doesn't mean everything's just roses after you get that all figured out.
Not at all.
It means that you have an understanding that you can take on more understanding.
Well, you have a foundation that cannot be taken from you.
Exactly.
Like yours was. Your foundation was taken from you. Where if you build the foundation within yourself, it can't be taken from you. It might be hard, whatever you go through. It might be challenging, but your foundation is there. Your validation of yourself is there. Now, one important note that I think we skipped is, how did you get your children back? What was the story there?
Oh, man. That was about 10 and a half years, about 10 years after I was excommunicated. No communication with family, anybody. I was just kind of living my life. Believe it or not, I was actually selling everything and getting ready to move to Germany.
Okay. Why?
Because that's where we were from.
Oh, okay.
And I was just like, I'm going to go back to Germany and,
figure it out.
I thought to myself, I'll just sell all my equipment and start over. Believe it or not, just months before I was about to make the move, I get a phone call from my brother Josh. And he goes, I've been excommunicated, Leash, Lib, Mom, several others. We're all excommunicated. We've been living in a trailer trying to repent in North Dakota. And
you're like, welcome to the club.
And I ended up meeting with them. I ended up meeting with my mother and Josh, and I found out that Isaac Jeffs and Seth Jeffs had taken the kids from my sisters. I hired lawyers and actually got my sister's kids back.
Oh, awesome.
I got a house for my mother and my brother Josh, and we started settling down. We were actually eating at a restaurant, and I'll never forget this day. And we were just talking, and my brother Josh said, well, your son Sterling is living in Minnesota. Your son John is in Colorado. Your son Hiram's in Texas. Your two girls are living in Las Vegas with somebody besides their mother, and all their names are changed.
What the heck?
And my mother actually looked at Josh and said, shh, you're going to break his heart. And I said, are you kidding me? And I actually wrestled with it for a couple months. And I finally said to myself, if they're not with their mother, which I trust their mother, then I'm going to go and get them. And it cost me 18 months. I had the FBI. I had Rangers and others involved in the investigation of these kids. It cost me $200,000 to get my own kids. It took 18 months, 3 court dates. The Lyle and their mother countersued me 3 times to get even 50% custody of the kids. That's a whole nother story that we could go into. But I ended up with, on the 3rd, Lenora and Lyle Jeffs filed a 14-page affidavit against me, including sexual assault.
Interesting.
The judge dismissed everybody out of the courtroom. Everybody, except for the 5 kids. And by this time, I was granted temporary custody of the kids, and I'd had them for several months. And on this 3rd court case, The judge actually dismissed everybody. The lawyers are all looking at each other like, what the heck? And he took them into chamber one at a time, not all of them together, one at a time into his chambers for 4 hours.
Oh, my gosh.
We're all sitting in the hallway. We're like, what the hell is going on?
He's trying to get the real story.
The judge actually read to the kids what was on that 14-page.
Oh, interesting.
Individually. He didn't put them collectively. Smart guy.
Yeah.
All the kids, every one of them. Dad never did this. Dad didn't do this. Dad's taking care of us. Dad, this, and that. On the third time, the judge actually got us all back in, and he says, Mr. Rohbock, I'm granting you full custody of the kids, and if it were my choice, I would never let them see their mother or any of this again. And I was granted full custody of the kids.
Incredible.
Wow. I actually walked up to their mother and I says, I want you to know my war isn't against you. And if you want to be a part of the kids' life, I'll actually move out of the house and let you be a part of them, because you haven't been a part of them. Mm-hmm. Because they had actually taken her and separated her.
Right.
The kids didn't even know their mother.
Yeah.
And I tried to shake Leroy Jeff's hands. He was there.
Mm-hmm.
And he wouldn't even shake my hand.
But he ended up getting excommunicated.
Yeah.
Wow.
But that is just a brief. I mean, there is so many facets and gears to this thing.
It's incredible.
That it has been a journey that has been, a long journey. I've got a granddaughter now, and I've got my kids. I've got a drawer full of letters from all my kids expressing their gratitude and thanking me for making them something that is loved, mm-hmm. and not just a number. Because one of the biggest battles I ever fought with my kids is everything was expendable.
Mm.
They took nothing serious because nothing was real.
Right.
And it took me a long time to break through to their minds that I am your dad, and I freaking love you, and I will be with you come hell or high water.
Yeah.
And that's something they didn't understand.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, they're getting tossed around. And
my son Sterling, because he was a lot like me, very independent, went through 15 different families, fist fights. You should see the whip marks on his back. I'm not kidding. I'm not making this up.
Wow.
My brother Rulin took his shirt off on a job, and I saw the whip marks, and I says, what the freak happened to your back? And he goes, well, you can thank the FLDS for that, because I just didn't play their game. 15 different families.
Wow.
When I finally got the FBI involved, and the FLDS got wind that I was coming,
mm-hmm.
they gathered all the kids up and put them back into the church in Colorado City. All my kids were farmed out. All of them had different names. We actually found an article or a document where Lyle had tried to change legally their names from Rohbock to Jeff's to the different names, but the judge denied it because they had to have my signature.
Oh, interesting.
I had abandoned them.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
But like I said, we could go on for many podcasts on all the other details that went on with all this.
Yeah. Well, dude, I mean, gosh, what an incredible story. And yeah, I know there's more to go, but I'll definitely have to have you on for a second visit. But I really appreciate you explaining, man, what an incredible story. I think it's inspiring. And I think that, the cherry on top is that you've reestablished yourself. You've found your power within you. And you're a quite successful construction businessman. I understand you have a massive house in Montana you're going to show me at some point.
Yeah, I'll take you up there and let you enjoy the property. It's fun.
Yeah. So, dude, love it, man. Thank you for coming on. We'll have you on again. All right, sir.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.